Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to the Royal Society of Medicine. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time here with us today at the Y Sports Conference, where we're focusing on creating active communities. Now, we know how busy everybody in this room is, so you can see there's a fair few of you in here, and that gives me a really good indication that the content today, the speakers today, are absolutely right, and this agenda is indeed very important to all of us. For those that don't know me, I wear two hats today. So the first, I am Chief Executive of Greater Sport. So we're the County Sports Partnership up in Greater Manchester. And the second, I'm an independent non-exec director for Y Sports. And I got involved with Y Sports because they really want to make a difference towards this inactivity challenge that we are facing. We're a social enterprise, and ultimately we want to make sure that our conferences help each and every one of you to leave today feeling that you've got some new ideas and some new opportunities, new connections that you can take forward in your everyday work. The national policy, and we'll hear some of that from our colleagues up on the front, sets some really hard challenges around reducing inactivity and particularly reducing inequalities. And it's a real challenge to do that on the ground. So with my day job on, I absolutely know the challenges that we're all facing. It's definitely not easy. So today's event really serves as an opportunity to remind us all of some of those key principles around the national policy. Your speakers are also really going to give you a very good update in terms of progress against Sporting Future towards an active nation, and hopefully some ideas and solutions around how you're implementing these policies in your communities and organisations where you come from to help us all turn this tide of inactivity. So we'd like the conversation to go beyond this room today. We know there are a number of people who wanted to be with us who haven't been able to make it down to London. So we are on social media. You can see up here we've got the hashtag YSportsLondon. If you can tag at YSports in, that would be great. Follow us even better. But let's get that conversation going today. So more than happy for people to be on tech. Just keep the volume down in order to show respect for our guests, please. Just some domestics before we get going into our speakers. We're not expecting a fire alarm. If there is one, please leave from the nearest exit either here or at the back of the room. And apparently we locate outside of the House of Fraser. So if you're unsure, look for that. There'll be a horde of people and just follow that. No going into the shops, please. We'd like to be able to do a head count. So yeah, no shopping today. If you've not already found the toilets, they're just outside in the coffee area down the main stairs there. So feel free to come and go as you need to there. And obviously you'll be aware you are have the opportunity to take part in a number of workshops throughout the day. Some of them are in here, others are in different parts of the building, so it'll tell you on your agenda where you need to go, and members of the Y Sport team will be around to help you find those rooms. If you're struggling, please just ask for help. So, I'm absolutely delighted to be your host for today. Thank you for your attention. You're going to have me for the whole day, you poor things. But we've lined up some amazing speakers, and we're kicking off this morning with 4 really great people who are going to provide the latest thinking in terms of national policy, but more importantly, the progress to that, and hopefully set the challenge for you in terms of provoking some thoughts about how you really are addressing those challenges in your localities this morning. So first up, I'm excited to introduce Andrew Honeyman. So Andrew is Head of Sport for the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here today, Andrew, and we're really looking forward to hearing about the progress on Sporting Futures. So over to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Yvonne. Good morning, everybody. A fantastic venue, really nice. So just to say a little bit more about myself, I've been head of sport at DCMS for the last 5 months. Before that, for the last 2-3 years, I've been working in the sport team in DCMS. So I've worked on the helped to produce Sporting Future, the sport strategy we published end of 2015, and since then I've been involved in implementing bits of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to assume that people are fairly familiar with Sporting Future. I'll say a little bit about the strategy and the context for it, and then say a bit more about how we're getting on in implementing it, and especially the bits about getting people active, fighting inactivity. And then a bit about maybe some of the remaining challenges, what still needs to be done. So, just to set the context for Sporting Future, the context for Sporting Future was June 2015. We had a new government coming in, brand new Minister for Sport, Tracy Crouch. In her first couple of weeks or so, we had some really quite disappointing figures around active people. So that was showing that participation in sport was flatlining. And at the time, our priorities were really around participation numbers in individual sports and numbers of Olympic and Paralympic medals. And Tracy's view, and it was fairly widely shared one, I think, at the time, was that something had to change. What we were doing wasn't working. So we launched a consultation in that summer, published it in August, and then published the strategy, having obviously digested the consultation responses at the end of the year. The context was we were already looking at a landscape in which people were really promoting the need to work in a cross-sector and cross-government way to fight inactivity. So we had the Cabinet Office led Moving More, Living More report in 2014, and then Public Health England's really seminal Everybody Active Every Day report, so the kind of guidelines for getting people active. And the Sporting Future report was comprehensive cross-departmental strategy, setting the long-term direction for all aspects of sport. So what does the strategy say? I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm going to pick out some of the things that really changed through Sporting Future. So we were talking about outcomes much more. So we were less preoccupied with the numbers of people playing sports. But what actually was that effect? What change was that affecting? So, so that was a big change. To complement that, a new measurement system, which I'll say a bit more about in a sec, Active Lives. And then the challenging the sector. So this is much more about not just running sport for the sporty, which was the kind of criticism that we were getting thrown at us, but how are we going to get people moving? How are we going to reach inactive people and less active people? How are we going to do things that suit them? So it's much more about being customer-focused, customer-led, underrepresented groups, so older people, disabled people, women, the people who are less likely to be active, people in lower socioeconomic groups. That was the really strong focus that was new for us. And obviously, there's a massive challenge for Sport England in all of this. We widened their remit to cover children from age 5 upwards, and to go beyond sport to wider physical activity. And that's in a slide what the strategy is. That's the framework. So the 5 key outcomes, which I'm hoping that you'll be familiar with at the top: physical well-being, mental well-being, individual development, social and community development, and economic development. So that in future, what we're talking about is funding for sport and physical activity really needs to show that it's delivering on one or more of those outcomes. If you're not, then really it's not going anywhere for us. And in terms of the outputs, that key one in the middle there, more people from every background regularly and meaningfully taking part in sport and physical activity, volunteering and experiencing live sport. So it's not just about participation, actually, it's also about volunteering and experiencing live sport. The real value of volunteering comes through really strongly. And at the bottom there, what are the actions? Actions that meet the needs of the customer and enable them to engage in sport and physical activity. So that's the focus, that customer focus. And we looked really closely in the strategy at what the contribution of sport is. And this is part of it being a cross-government strategy. Where can sport support other people's agendas, other departments' agendas, and hopefully bringing in interest but also funding into sport and physical activity. So, clearly physical health, absolutely paramount. Physical activity has a massive impact on preventing huge variety of health issues. It's about the future cost of the NHS, and essentially we can't not do it. I mean, there was no alternative but to have a real look at prioritising getting the communities and population more active. Mental health and well-being, so emotional health, positive body image, feeling good, tackling isolation, and so on. So individual self-development, that third outcome, it's about people developing skills, it's about becoming more employable, improving educational attainment, improving teamwork, economic growth. Social and community good, so I talked about volunteering, but the impact that sport can have on communities, it brings communities together in ways that very few other things do. So impact on community cohesion, civic engagement, and then finally, perhaps less for this one, but sport as a driver to the economy and brand Britain. We really need to shout from the rooftops the value of sport to our economy and help that sporting economy to grow. And use it in soft power, and I'll say a bit more about soft power and in the current climate a little bit later on. Important to say, sport can contribute to these, but it's not going to be the sole vehicle for delivering all of these benefits, obviously. Progress so far. So we said when we published Sporting Future that we would report annually to Parliament on progress. We've done that. We produced a report this February, we're setting out what we've done. I think Tracy Crouch, the Minister, would say we've done a great deal, but there's an awful lot still to do. You know, we have done a lot, but this is clearly going to be a long-term effort. It's not just about government, it's about a whole range of sectors working together to deliver the change we want to see. But in terms of the progress so far, we have a new sports governance code. So organisations in sport that are receiving funding need to comply. So they need to have modern governance. That's about effectiveness and about diversity. That's starting to see a massive change in the sporting organisation landscape. I'll say a bit more in a minute about active lives, but that's a big change. A new survey brought in this January is currently running alongside active people, but it'll take over next year. Mike will say a bit more in a minute about Sport England strategy, but that really was a fantastic step forward, putting flesh on the bones of our strategy, how it's actually going to be delivered, and that upfront commitment to putting a quarter of their funding into fighting inactivity. Tony Gray-Thompson's Duty of Care report, really significant about a whole range of issues, safeguarding mental health and so on, how we run sport and sport's duty of care to its participants. Andy Reid's important report on county sports partnerships, and that's been taken forward now. We've got a Sports Business Council set up now, co-chaired by Tracy Crouch and Richard Scudamore from the Executive Chairman of the Premier League. That's about growing the sport economy. It's about sports positioning in the delivering the government's industrial strategy and really growing that economy, sporting economy. Sport England have delivered the coaching plan in November last year and volunteering strategy shortly afterwards. They're on the way to delivering a workforce strategy too, but getting the people right is really important. I'll say more about that in a sec. Public Health England reported to us, to Tracy Crouch, on how they're getting on how the country is getting on in implementing that Everybody Active Every Day report. And we had a really successful Rio Olympic and Paralympic Games, second in both medal tables, and targets exceeded. So fighting inactivity, absolutely core to Sporting Future. And as I said, this is a massive shift in policy, a shift to, in funding terms, from kind of historically where we've funded sport through national governing bodies to deliver sport for, arguably for largely sporty people, to funding a wide variety of partners to fight inactivity. And many of them will still be national governing bodies where they can show that they can fight inactivity and they can meet those 5 outcomes. But hopefully it'll be a much wider variety of partners. I think Sporting are beginning to see that. As I said, huge upfront commitment from Sport England, 250 million over 4 years to go on fighting inactivity. That's a quarter of all their funding, and we're starting to see that roll out now. So £10 million on an active ageing fund, £40 million on funding to get families active, and up to 130 million on local delivery pilots. And actually, just in the last couple of weeks, there's another funding announced about tackling economic disadvantage, which is a massive priority, reaching those lower socio-economic groups and helping them to get active. I did want to say a bit about local delivery pilots, because for me, because it comes out of a specific recommendation in Sporting Future, really, which is about if you get all the relevant partners in an area working together to get people active, and you bung in a bit of resource on top of that, what can you achieve, and how can that learning be rolled out across the country? So for me, that's the most important and most exciting recommendation of all the 90 in Sporting Future. I think that's the most important. And so we're following the work that Mike and his team are taking forward with really close interest. That's been rolled out now. They're in the process of identifying their around 10 areas to receive the funding. So it's about 130 million in about 10 areas over that 4-year period. The aim, as I said, is to work in those local areas, which could be big, small, urban, rural, with a whole range of partners, trying new things, things that will achieve that lasting behavioural change we want to see. So finding out what works, and maybe a bit about finding out what doesn't work. It needs a whole system change to get people active, to fight the inactivity that we're facing today. It's a massive opportunity and a massive challenge. As I say, there's going to be a mix of areas, and that's a really strong commitment. And it isn't just about those 10 areas, it's about making sure that the learning that's coming out of those 10 areas and evaluating what's working and what's not working will be a key part of it. That gets shared across the country, and that drives wider change. So we hope that will get started towards the end of this year, but that's a really big one for us. We are the Department for Digital now, as well as Culture, Media and Sport, and it's really important that we use data well and effectively to get people moving. I mentioned Active Live Survey. It's now in. It's giving us, I think, a much broader and more robust understanding of the picture of what sport and physical activity people are doing. Looks at, it's a better system, better way of, it's a better way of identifying how people are being active. We've just got into schools in this month at Active Lives Children. That's going to be 100,000 children a year, identifying what activity they're doing, measuring the levels of activity and their attitudes. And our colleagues in health and education are really interested in this. This is a world-leading initiative. And just to mention briefly, Sporting England's collaboration with the Open Data Institute, which is really about helping sport open up its data, and the aim would be to make it as easy to book a tennis court as it is to book a hotel room. As a sector, we're behind on that. Workforce, we need to have the right people if we're going to deliver the change, and so we need greater diversity. We need a clearer systems in terms of professional standards, career pathways, properly quality assured training. So it's great that Sporting England just last week has announced funding for SIMSPA, the Chartered Institute for Management of Sport and Physical Activity. They're taking forward a really important piece of work in that area. We need to make sure that the new apprenticeship system works properly, that we've got the HE and FE work and provide the employers with the skills that they need. As I said, it's a cross-government strategy. It's really important that this is cross-government. I think we've made some good strides in working across government on fighting inactivity. Personally, I think this is one of my challenge areas. There's a lot more to do. So following on from Sporting Future, we've delivered a childhood obesity plan, which has a strong emphasis on physical activity. Money from the sugar levy going on school sport and PE. Rupert will say more in a minute about the cycling walking investment strategy published earlier in the year with hugely ambitious targets there on getting people cycling and walking more. We're talking to other departments about a variety of issues, mental health, which is an absolute priority for my minister, Tracy Crouch, social integration, how sport can help on crime prevention and gangs, how it links to civil society and volunteering and social investment, and all of these things. I think we've got lots of progress to make here, lots to do, but it's an evolving picture. So final slide, just on challenges and opportunities. So without banging on about money too much, we're obviously in a context of a really difficult situation with local government facing funding difficulties, falling lottery sales. A lot of our funding comes from the lottery. We had a really successful, comparatively good settlement in 2015 at the spending review. We were able to make a strong case that our strategy helped us to do that. We're now using that money, spending that money well. But there'll be another spending review around the corner, and we need to make sure that we're as well placed there. Brexit is a huge challenge and opportunity, obviously, but sport can be used in some of those international trade deals that we'll be seeing in the next few years. I mentioned digital. We've really got to make the best of technology to get people active. Digital can sometimes be seen as something that stops people being active, but that's a huge challenge as well as an opportunity. And my minister's number one priority is safeguarding, so making sure that sport is safe and people are confident in sending their children out to sport and physical activities. So there are lots of other challenges and opportunities. I'll leave it there. I hope this is the start of a conversation. I hope there will be time for some questions. That's my contact details. Thank you very much for listening.